Do you have a tight neck? Oftentimes, neck tightness tries to get resolved through different stretches or other things, but what we see is it comes back really quickly unless these underlying issues are addressed. On this week's episode of the Exercises Health Podcast, we are going to unveil what these issues are and how to go about addressing them. We're going to cue our introduction and we're going to dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and today we are diving into this topic of neck tightness. This is a really common complaint that a lot of people experience, especially if they spend a lot of time working on a computer, seated at a desk, or kind of hunched over, working or looking on their smartphone. Which honestly, like, who's not doing that these days, right? Like, everybody has their device that they're spending a lot of time looking at, and while that can often be demonized, we're not here to tell you to not do that. In fact, we're here to give you a roadmap of things that you can do to help your neck not only just feel better, but actually function better. So whatever it is you want to do, your neck will be able to hold up to doing that, even spending endless hours scrolling through your smartphone.
That's right. I think that in today's world specifically, we're going to be in positions that are less than ideal for our neck with, we want to blame devices. But for forever, our bodies have always been in quote unquote less ideal positions for something, right? And we always want to blame it on that something. Like right now, the trend is like, oh, it's because we're on our smartphones or we're typing all day. Our shoulders are up to our ears. We want to blame something. But in the end, no matter what is going on in your body, if you're having symptoms in a certain area, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have an issue in that area. But it does mean that you're having, your body's talking to you, telling you that something is a lot in that area. And so right now, we do talk about, oh my gosh, I'm just on my phone too much. If I could just get off my phone, it would be better. But actually, there's things that you can do with your body to be able to handle these positions better so that your body can handle being, slouched over. It's funny, a lot of times we also talk about posture when it comes to neck. Like, oh my goodness, my neck is so tight because I have poor posture. Blah, blah, blah. But in the end, it's just telling you that whatever is going on, your body is not handling it. It's not tolerating it. Your body's not strong enough to handle the positions that you're regularly visiting. So that's the point of view we're going to address this at, so that you can have tools to change your body and be able to handle the things that you do already with your phone or with typing or whatever you want to currently blame your neck tightness on, but so that you can keep doing those things with less symptoms.
Yeah, Julie, it's a really key distinction that you bring up about this idea of like, hey, your body is not tolerating whatever it is in life that you're doing. And we're not going to put any emotion around it. We're just going to be very objective and say, hey, this is where your body's at. If you want to be able to not have these symptoms, if you want to be able to do things more comfortably, then we need to progress your body along in certain ways, okay? And a lot of times what we see when people are having these neck symptoms is they tend to do things specifically for the neck. They will use a massage gun. They will look up different stretches and just try to relieve the tightness. But if you've ever listened to our podcast for any length of time, then you know that our approach is not just about relieving the tightness directly. We need to figure out why the tightness is there. And so often what we see is where there is tightness, there is also underlying weakness. And by getting the weak areas stronger, the tightness goes away on its own. So what are we talking about? Does this mean we need to do, a whole bunch of neck exercises and, strap the cable to our heads and, with the medieval looking things? But no, we don't.
Train like a football
player. Right,
player.
exactly. No, we don't need to do that, okay? In fact, a lot of the areas that need to be strengthened are not associated with the neck directly, which for a lot of people actually brings a lot of mental emotional relief of like, oh good, I don't need to, put weights on my head or something like that. It's like, there are other areas of your body that we see have a profound impact in how people's necks feel and function. And that's really where we want to start off with you today.
So the first area that is not your neck, but has a direct impact on your neck because they're shared muscles, is your shoulders and your shoulder blades. And this makes sense because if you think about like your neck, the next area down, you know what I was trying to say. The next area supporting the neck is going to be your shoulder complex. So just the whole general shoulder area. So we find that when people are regularly strength training through their shoulders, the muscles of their shoulders, their shoulder blades, their clavicle, if those muscles are controlling those joints really well, it provides a robust foundation for your neck. Because remember, our bodies don't just mistakenly tighten up. It's not like, whoops, giving you a tight neck today, or oh my gosh, you were, bent over your phone all day yesterday, so here you go, here's your tight neck. Your body will give you tightness to protect itself, which means that there's a presence of weakness. And so when we're thinking about where are we going to start addressing this weakness, a really great place to start, and a place that Charlie and I often start, is by looking at the shoulder complex. So again, that's going to be technical names like your glenohumeral joint, which is like your shoulder joint. Like if you think about moving or doing like shoulder, arm circles or whatever, that would be your shoulder joint. You can also think about your shoulder blade. So if you do like shrugs, like taking your shoulders to your ears and down, those would be your shoulder blade controllers or your shoulder blade muscles. And then we also have muscles that pull and control your clavicle, which again would be very similar muscles to those shoulder blade motions. So starting with the shoulders and the shoulder blades is a really key component, because the shoulder is held to your body strongly and mostly by muscles. It doesn't have a very robust support system from the skeletal or bone system. And so we think about how the joint is moving, it's really fully controlled by the muscles. So muscles go from the shoulder and the arm bone into the spine, into the neck, into this, the cervical spine. And it also is going into the rib cage. So this whole complex is literally feeding into your neck, which has a high impact on how your neck is going to feel.
Yeah, Julie, this is huge. And a lot of times when we bring it up to people, they often seem surprised. Like, well, it's my neck that's bothering me. What are you doing looking at my shoulders? But when they actually take a step back and think about it, it makes a lot of sense. And you don't even have to have like a mechanics background or physiology background or anything like that to understand why. And the reason why I say that is because so often when people come in and they're experiencing a neck issue, and we have them walk us through what they had done, the previous few days, all right? I have yet to have a client describe something where they were lifting something with their neck. Like, people aren't lifting things with their neck aside from their head, right? But what they will describe is, well, I was reaching from the front seat of my car into the back seat a lot. Like, I had to grab a lot of, handing a lot of things back to my kids, or, that, okay? So it's, okay, you're using, your shoulders in a very extreme motion. Or they'll say, well, I was carrying a lot of things, around my house or around my yard, heavy bags of mulch or something like that. So, okay, you were holding things with your arms, using your shoulders in ways that you weren't used to before. Or, I was having to reach up really high with my shoulder, pick up things, a lot from, top shelves and stuff like that. So what they describe as far as what preceded the onset of their neck bugging them or, neck tightness or things like that are a lot of more extreme endeavors with their shoulders. There's a lot more extreme activities from a motion perspective or from an effort perspective or from like an endurance duration of time perspective. Like, it may not have felt a lot to be, carrying your bags around, the mall, but you did it for 7 hours on a Saturday, and those bags got heavier and heavier and heavier because surprisingly, nobody goes to the mall and like drops stuff off. Like, you just keep adding stuff, right? And so by the end of the day, you would think, oh, my shoulders would be very sore, but a lot of people wake up the next day and they're like, wow, my neck is really bugging me. And it's not because you were lifting the bags with your neck, it's because you are using your shoulders, and the influence that the shoulders have over the neck, it can start to cause different symptoms and different issues to be experienced with the neck.
Yeah, and to add on that, I was just thinking there's a handful of muscles that connect from your shoulder right into your skull.
Absolutely.
So, like through your neck all the way up. So, so that's right, Charlie. So when we see that the shoulders are getting taxed or there's dysfunction in the shoulders, there's weakness, there's instability, a lot of times the neck will compensate by creating some tightness to protect it. So again, the first place that we oftentimes will recommend looking at and looking for dysfunction is right in the shoulders, or if there's an overtaxation in the shoulders. Definitely start there, because it has just a profound impact on how the neck is feeling, functioning, and it really is highly influential over whether the neck is going to be tight, and trying to be protective, especially if the shoulders are not stable and a good foundation for the neck.
Absolutely. The second place that we see have a profound impact on the neck is the mid to upper back. And oftentimes this is called like the thoracic spine. And this is the part of your spine that should have more of a kind of rounded curvature, or more of like a hunchback curvature, not necessarily to that extreme, but going in that direction. And so what we see a lot is when people are spending a lot of time on their devices or on computers, or something where they have more of a hunched over posture or more of a forward head posture, we think about the stress that it puts on the neck, but we also need to be cognizant of the stress that it's putting on that thoracic spine area. And what we see is by getting the muscles stronger and working better, that help to control that thoracic spine, the mid to upper back areas, a lot of times that can help relieve the stress that's being experienced by the neck.
It's funny when we think about strengthening your back, and we're going to get to this, we oftentimes will think about the lower back, but the mid to upper back also has an entire complex of spinal specific muscles, like just for your spine and your spinal column, right? And so a lot of times, if you weren't aware, now you're aware, there's shoulder muscles that feed into your spine that really control your spine and your upper back, but there are also just spinal muscles that also control your mid to upper back. And these are muscles we rarely ever think about strengthening. Most of the time, because I think that it's more common to think about like back pain in your low back, so you think about, oh, there might be a problem in my low back. But in the mid to upper back, we find a lot of weakness because, number one, it's avoided, and number two, a lot of people don't really know that they should be strengthening there. So that would be a great area to dive into in terms of looking at weaknesses, not only in the shoulders that feed into the upper to mid back, but also the spinal specific muscles. The other thing I wanted to throw in here is, when I always get a really tight neck is after I've been sick for a couple days.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, and one thing we find a lot, especially with respiratory illnesses, because the intercostal muscles feed into the mid to upper back, they're like the thoracic region, they can also create a lot of weakness and instability in the thorax area, and that can cause a lot of tight muscles in the neck. So again, it's not like you had the neck issue. It's just your neck is tightening because of weakness, instability, dysfunction below it. And, it's just our job to start addressing it.
Exactly. And if you're wondering what intercostal muscles are, if you've ever eaten ribs, that's what you're eating. You're eating intercostal muscles.
The muscles between each rib cage.
The muscles that line each rib, or between each rib. So when you go and eat ribs, you're eating intercostals. But like you're saying, Julie, like when people are coughing a lot or breathing is disrupted, they're having some, like you're saying, some upper respiratory illness, then that can definitely start to affect not only the mid to upper back in that thoracic spine area, but up into the neck as well. Area number 3 that we see have a huge influence over the neck is the low back, the lumbar spine area. And this is what a lot of people think of when they think of their back, is just kind of the lower area of it. But obviously we just described that there's a whole area above the low back. But we still see that this low back area has a profound impact over the neck. And so a lot of times what can happen is there can be almost a mirror relationship between what's going on in the lumbar spine and what's going on in the cervical spine. Meaning when your low back moves or doesn't move a certain way, your cervical spine can often mirror that and move or not move a certain way. And what we see is when there's more and more dysfunction and weakness going on with the low back, the cervical spine may try to make up for that weakness, to try to say, okay, well, we're trying to move in this way, but the low back can't move in that way, and now I need to start to move more in this way. And so we start to see that the cervical spine or the neck area may start to get stressed out because of dysfunction, insufficient strength insufficient mobility in the lower back area. And by getting the muscles of the lower back stronger, working better, not only does it help to support the lower back more, that lumbar spine area, but it can help relieve stress that the cervical spine is experiencing as well.
Honestly, Charlie, in my experience with working with the muscle system, this is the number one place that I find to be like the central issue when it comes to neck issues. This is like the number one place where people come in for like hip pain, and we start working on their core and their low back because that's so related to hip pain. And then they're like, well, I didn't tell you my neck was bothering me, but now I don't have a tight neck. And I'm like, oh, okay. Anyways, so when we're thinking about the low spine, this is like the lumbar spine. Like Charlie was saying, we often see this kind of mirroring effect where it's like when the low spine is being stressed, that cervical spine is also having to take quite a bit of load. And the muscles specifically that we find that are addressing this are muscles that are controlling the low back. So you can think about like your spinal muscles, just like the thoracic muscles had those thoracic muscles, they also have the division of the lumbar that feed into it. But you can also think about more global muscles, like bigger muscles. Like when you think about working your core, like the rectus abdominis has a direct impact on your low back or your lumbar spine. Things like your obliques, those directly feed into fascia that feed into, your low spine joints and muscles. And so all of those type of low back core muscles, those have a huge and profound impact. They do not touch the neck like the shoulder ones do, but we do find that it just has a really high correlation of, hey, when this low back area gets stabilized, the neck often will start to relieve itself, meaning it's not feeling like it has to put intentional tightness there. It's not feeling like, oh my goodness, we need to hold on for dear life because there's weakness and instability elsewhere.
Exactly. Okay, so what do we go about, or how do we go about addressing this? What do we do with this information now that we have an idea of, okay, we need to consider our shoulders and our shoulder blades, and then our mid to upper back and our low back? How do we go about doing that? Well, step number one for us is to identify and address the specific muscle issues using the muscle activation techniques process, using MAT. Identify which muscles throughout the body and in these areas are not contracting well and get them contracting better using the MAT system.
That's right, Charlie. So if you go to see your local MAT specialist, someone that specializes in the function of how muscles are working, you can expect them to be looking at your neck, your shoulders, your shoulder blades, your upper back, your low back. They'll probably do a full body assessment. But oftentimes, this is the places where we're starting. This is the places where we will regularly see, and we expect to see dysfunction if you're going to come in talking about a tight neck. But it's also the place where we see a lot of dysfunction if you're in those postures a lot that bring out a tight neck. Remember, we're not demonizing these postures. We're not saying, oh, don't, sleep with a pillow anymore, or don't, go on your phone. We already know, like, you got to sleep and you got to be on your phone these days to be connected or to do your work or whatever your reason. So you got to type. But this does mean that we want to make sure that your body is handling those positions really well. Because again, it's not the issue with the posture. It's actually the issue with your body. It's weakness in your body. It's that your body can't handle these positions. It's not the positions themselves. It's actually that, hey, we just need some really specific strengthening. We need some stabilization. And that is what MAT is the master at being really, really specific at figuring out, well, what areas, what parts of your body and what areas of your body are really struggling to handle these positions that you're asking it to be in for minutes or hours a day.
For sure. Okay, then step number 2, once you get the muscles of your shoulders and your mid to upper back and your low back strong, contracting well, functioning at the level that they need to be functioning, then it's time to go into step number 2, which is to start doing some general strengthening exercises, some general strength training for your shoulders, for your upper body, for your core, for your low back, okay? A lot of times we want to see the exact exercise series that we need to do that will help to, relieve our tight neck and everything like that. And it's like, no, hold up. First, the specificity comes with the MAT process. And then once you get things functioning better, then you can actually take a step back from a specificity standpoint and just focus a little bit more generally on, hey, you just need to get stronger through your shoulders. You just need to get stronger through your upper body, through your core, through your trunk, and doing general strengthening, still following the 4 exercise for life principles. This doesn't mean mindless strengthening. This means very focused strengthening, but there's not like a secret exercise regimen that you need to follow in order to get these areas stronger. Start doing strength training for them, follow the 4 exercise for life principles, and again, that will help to support the function and how well the neck feels overall.
And honestly, you have to be strength training everywhere to create balance. A lot of times when we have a symptom, especially if you have something that is really bothersome and you think it's like a serious issue, like, oh my goodness, my neck hurts, it's tight, I saw this YouTuber that said I had to do a whole bunch of exercises to get my shoulders back. Well, the problem with that is that could be your issue, right? We did bring up some shoulder blade stuff, but the shoulder blade also does a handful of other motions that you need to be training and strengthening. It's not just one thing. Even if you think, oh my goodness, my shoulders sit forward all the time, so that means I must do exercises to take my shoulders back. Doesn't necessarily mean your shoulder bringer backers or your shoulder retractors are having an issue. It's important that you're doing full body strength training no matter what position you view your body to be in, because the stronger your body is overall, the more that your body can handle more and more positions. And our body doesn't always show us visually what's going on. We see this all the time, especially because with MAT, we're testing very specific muscles, and people are like, oh yeah, my retractors, my shoulder bringer backers must be so weak because I have quote unquote terrible posture and that's making my neck tight or something like that. And we find that their retractors are fully functioning and strong. We also find that sometimes they're not. So that just means that we need to be doing total body, full body strength training for all muscles in the body.
Absolutely. Okay, and then step number 3 is you can start doing strength training for the neck specifically. But this is where the specificity actually needs to go up a little bit because of the sensitivity of the neck, meaning from the amount of nerves that are going through that area and how disruptive it can be to people's overall sense of well-being, like when your neck gets thrown off. It's really important that if you're going to be doing strength training for your neck, that you are more specific with it, that you are super mindful about how you're going about doing it, and you're very conscientious of your exercise choices for it. And when you meet with your local MAT practitioner, you'll be able to understand, okay, these are the motions and these are the muscles that seem to be bigger issues with my neck directly. You'll be able to figure out, exercises from there, with that kind of guidance. But really, when it comes to strengthening the neck, a lot of stuff that you might see of, again, like strap the thing to your head and just turn, or, just lift or whatever. Again, from a general strengthening perspective, like that can be useful. But if we're talking about an area that has been sensitive for you in the past, that you've had issues with in the past, if we're going to go and strengthen that area directly, we need to be very mindful of how we're going about doing it. And so that's where getting another set of eyes and another level of experience to chime in on what exercise you're doing for it can be super, super helpful.
That's right. So we do leave that for step 3 because that, again, needs to be very specifically dosed. So if you think about if you have medicine, there's a certain amount that you want to do. We don't just want you haphazardly doing some crazy neck exercises just because of the sensitivity of the neck. We know that there are ways to fully change your sensation of tightness in your neck and strengthen your neck without ever doing specific neck stuff that you might see on the internet. So just to recap, the areas that we are thinking about as muscle specialists when it comes to your tight neck is first and foremost your shoulders, your shoulder blades, the whole shoulder complex, your upper and mid back, and then finally your low back. And then when we think about addressing this issue, the first thing we recommend is go find your local MAT specialist. If you're in the Chicagoland area, we'd love to see you here, but this will really help to identify what areas are causing tight issues in your neck, because we'll be able to identify what muscles are weak or inhibited, your body's struggling to connect with them, struggling to bring strength to them, and that's why your body is in this chronic protective, aka tight state. And the next thing is general strength training. Make sure you're strengthening your entire body. Of course, specifically the shoulders, mid-back, and low back, but make sure you're following the 4 Exercise for Life principles so that you're doing it in a safe, productive manner. If you're getting any kind of soreness, ickiness, tightness after you work out, one of those 4 principles is being violated, and there's a way to more productively do your strength training. And lastly, adding in specific strength training for your neck, which is more appropriate for some people than others, and not necessary for all people to change how their neck is feeling. But of course, that last one, please proceed with caution.
Exactly. So if you are in the Chicagoland area, you would like to get on our schedules for muscle activation techniques to get your body assessed and figure out where you have muscles that are not contracting as well as they should, and thereby causing symptoms throughout the rest of your system, all you have to do is go to www.matschaumburg.com. There's a big green button that says Get Started. You can click that. You can see our availability and book yourself for your initial MAT consultation and assessment. And if you would like our guidance as you're going through your workouts utilizing the 4 Exercise for Life principles, that's exactly what we teach you to do within the Exercise for Life membership. You can get your first 30 days for free by going to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that has experienced chronic neck tightness no matter how much they've stretched, no matter how much they've tried to relax it, it always seems to come back. Share this episode with them so they can hear about some other areas of their body that may be influencing their neck and contributing to what they are experiencing on a regular basis. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to us and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.